I'm currently working in Arlington ISD at Sam Houston High School. I'm one of the assistant band directors there. I'm also the color guard sponsor. I student taught in Allen ISD at Allen High School and at Ford Middle School.
I'm Valeria. I currently work at Corinth Elementary, and that's in Dallas ISD. I'm the music teacher, and I teach pre-K through fifth grade. I student taught in Denton ISD, and I did my elementary portion at WS Ryan Elementary, and I did my middle school portion at McMath Middle School.
Hello, everybody. My name is Tyler Atkins. I am currently teaching in the Houston Independent School District, and I am the director of bands at Pershing Middle School. I student taught in Keller ISD at Central High School and Hillwood Middle School.
I currently work in Lubbock-Cooper ISD. I'm an assistant band director at Lubbock-Cooper High School, although we also work with the middle schools. I student taught in Denton ISD at Geyer High School and Crownover Middle School.
So student teaching is great, depending on how much energy and time you put into it. And also depending on your placement, there's always that just that fit factor of if you get along with your co-ops and the people around you. More often than not, you're going to be with people who want to help you learn. So if you put in the effort to be there and learn as much as you can and just try, more often than not, student teaching will work out for you. And it worked out well for me, at least for the most part, until we all had to, leave. So yeah, that's the end of that. Student teaching is hard, but it's also easy. Just show up and try your best and you'll get something out of it.
I want to tag into what Allie said specifically about depending on how you get along with each person, because you're not necessarily going to get along with each of your cooperating teachers equally well. And it's up to you to advocate for yourself. Like, I had to figure out the right way for me to ask my middle school director to let me do things, because she was totally willing, but I just had to come up with all of it myself. So just find what works for you to get your cooperating teacher to let you have a good teaching experience.
Yeah, actually kind of going off of that, and wow, I already hate piggybacking, but I really think that Melinda kind of hit on a point that I was going to talk about, which is kind of like finding a way to communicate with your director or any of the directors that work at your middle school or your high school, because that can really determine how well your student teaching semester is going to go. Simply just finding out like what is the best way to get in contact with your co-op. So that may be like a phone call for somebody, that may be a text for somebody, that may be an email. More often than not, it's not an email, that's a secret. So like finding that way to get in contact with them and then applying that as you go up through the semester. For me personally, I'm just going to be upfront about it. I did not have a good student teaching experience. And partially that was because I didn't know how to reach out to my co-ops. And we can talk about what that means later, and because I can go on a tangent about that. But again, so I think just the point for now, just finding that that way of communication with your co-ops will really determine your student teaching semester.
So my student teaching experience, I'll mainly talk about my elementary student teaching experience, because my middle school, I was at the middle school for a week and then we got shut down, and that's a whole thing. But my elementary experience was awesome, and I think it went well because my mentor teacher did a really good job of answering my questions, which sounds dumb because you think mentor teachers are supposed to ask questions. But my mentor teacher was willing to look at the way she taught and analyze it and even critique it. So then I was able to learn a lot from her, like knowing exactly why you do a certain thing and the teaching things you can get out of why she does one thing. So she was just really great at answering my questions. And I learned along the way that she was there to answer my questions, and I didn't have to feel like I was annoying her, because you're packing like a whole year's worth of questions and curriculum into like 6 weeks at the elementary. So I would say just ask questions, so many questions.
For me, at the beginning, and I was in a place where I was very lucky. I got the opportunity to work with a lot of different directors, and they were all very welcoming to student teachers. So they were welcoming and just letting us sit in on literally everything. But because of that, our day turned into going from teaching every day and getting that hands-on experience and being busy by just doing all the things to then just sitting in meetings all day and listening, no longer getting to partake in anything, no longer getting to experience anything firsthand. Teaching, and you learn this in your first year, is all about like trial and error of what works with different students. So when half of student teaching is no longer that, it's just kind of like another music ed class of just sitting and listening to how other people do it. And if that works for them, great, but that doesn't necessarily work for you. So that transition was kind of hard. It was hard because like I said, you went from doing everything and trying to ask all the questions and being engaged to just sitting there and being kind of a fly on the wall. And even if you get the opportunity I got the opportunity to teach a little bit through Zoom, but it's not the same and it's not a lot of opportunity. And again, it just goes to show that like you don't get that experience of the trial and error on what works with different kids and your own personal style of teaching, which then makes this first year very difficult for those same reasons. We're still virtual. And so everything that you've been taught in your music ed classes and in your ensemble classes on how to do a rehearsal, how to run a class, classroom management, we don't have that teaching experience to then transfer, this is what works in the classroom with me, to adapting it in a virtual setting. We are now just kind of flying by the seat of our pants, just like everyone else, but with way less experience. So, student teaching with that, in my opinion, for me was kind of difficult.
I feel like I was lucky with with how we transitioned from in-person to virtual. My middle school opted for mainly asynchronous learning when they went online, so I wasn't really involved with them after spring break, but my high school went all out Zoom sectionals, kind of, it sounds like Allie's situation was. But my cooperating teacher was like, hey, Melinda can teach the third band sectionals. So I feel fortunate in that I was still able to get some teaching experience, even though it was more like just going through the motions of, okay, we're all gonna play this together while everybody's muted except one kid, and I'm just going to try my best. I second what Allie said about it not being a substitute for the real experience. I'm very worried for when we approach concert season, because after spring break is when you're supposed to get up and conduct the whole ensemble. So my conducting background is very small, but I don't fear that I'm going to struggle that much more than I would have as a first year teacher anyway. I feel like my head director is looking out for me right now, and whenever we're able to do concert stuff again, I think that she'll be willing to guide me through that, kind of like my cooperating teacher would have during student teaching.
So our transition, I guess it was kind of a little rough. Actually, I'm sure everybody's transition was rough, not just mine specifically. But I remember like the week before spring break happened, we left for spring break happened, and they were like, COVID, never mind. So then they were like, okay, now we have 2 weeks. So just wait for 2 weeks. And so I was like, okay, great. Like I get a break. Like driving to school every day, so like I can't do that. Like it's weighing on me. It's like the middle of the semester. And then they were like, you know what? Just stay home. Just stay. Like don't come back. And so I was kind of just like left to my own devices for that most part. So like the week after spring break, I didn't hear anything from my middle school co-op or any of the directors at the middle school or the high school. And so there was kind of like this limbo where I was just kind of stuck, and I wasn't like, I didn't know what was going to happen. Like I didn't know if student teaching was still going to be like a thing. I thought they were just going to like kind of quit altogether. About a week later, I got in touch with my co-ops, and they said, okay, this is what we're going to do. And it was essentially synchronous. So they sat down with about 100 kids, because it was all the middle school kids in one block. And they did that for 30 minutes every day. And kind of like what I'm doing now. So that kind of gave me a little bit of an idea of what to do, because they did like rhythm in the beginning for 10 minutes, sight reading for another 10 minutes, and then scales for another 10 minutes. And that was the lesson Monday through Thursday. So I got to see how they formatted that and see like what kind of structure that they put in place for virtual learning. Because I think that's what I probably would have struggled with, is what I am struggling with right now, is structure through virtual learning, because that's what kids crave, even in person, and that's what they need even more now because they're behind the screen. And they need like those expectations of like what are we going to do today? Like what topics are we going to discuss? You know, for these however many minutes it may be for you. But for me, it's 20 minutes every day. Sometimes I take a little bit more, don't tell my boss. And we just kind of try to do the thing as much as possible. Like right now, I'm kind of filling in the gaps for a lot of what I'm teaching right now, because they haven't like seen or touched music for the last 6 months. And so that's, it's really kind of a struggle in that manner. Whereas like with student teaching, like they were already like having some kind of structure before COVID, and they just tried to apply it as much as possible to virtual learning. Seeing that process, I think, really helped me in that regard. But again, it's still a struggle like now. And just like Allie said, like we're still like first year teachers. So we were going to struggle regardless, but now we're struggling because of the virtual aspect.
Yeah, so my transition into virtual learning for student teaching was also a little rough. And it was, I think, mainly because of the situation I was in. I was at the elementary, like all the way up until the week before spring break. And then the week before spring break, I came into the middle school as a brand new person. The kids didn't know who I was. My mentor teacher, when I first walked in, he was like, "Can I help you?" So I walked in completely new. And that was actually the week of UIL. So for 2 days out of the 3-day week, we were at UIL. And then the Friday, everyone just like celebrated UIL and like, yay, we're done. There was like a pizza thing. They threw away their music, and then they went home for spring break. So when spring break happened and we didn't go back to school for like never after that, the kids, when we finally did realize that we're not going back to school, maybe like 2 weeks or 2 or 3 weeks in, that's when the band directors decided to actually like, I guess we need to do something virtually. So I didn't really have a whole lot to do with virtual learning. I was mainly like, honestly, kind of a secretary the whole time, which I understood why I was, because I didn't really have a purpose in the way that they were doing virtual learning. They kind of just did a Facebook Live every morning. They did like jumping jacks and like little like aerobic stretches. And then they would do like just some basic tone exercise and scale exercises. So I would just go in and do attendance every day. So it wasn't super helpful for me, but I was okay with that because I knew I wanted to do elementary, and now I'm technically in person mostly. So it wasn't ideal, but it wasn't ideal for everyone. So I'm not mad about it.
Okay, I'm gonna be brutally honest, and I'm here to like tell you how it is. What helps you in undergrad is what you put into it. So my methods classes, like sure they helped kind of a little bit, but they only helped because then I went and took a bunch of secondary lessons and applied that knowledge I was told to learn it myself. I learned a lot from teching. I learned a lot from the short-lived student teaching that I had. I learned a lot from being in concert ensembles and listening around me and being like, wow, I thought that rep, the horns sucked. Why did I think they suck? What would I do in this situation as the director, as like the educator? Not to say that your music ed classes are useless, because they're not. They provide you that knowledge on kind of, for the most part, what you should be looking for and listening for, but you have to do the work yourself. You have to go out and find, what you're wanting to do. I want to teach elementary. I want to teach middle school. I want to teach high school. And you have to go out and do the work yourself. You have to, okay, I want to teach high school. I'm going to go tech so I can kind of figure out how to do marching band. I'm going to teach lessons so I can apply that knowledge I get in, my primary lessons to see how I can do that for other students. When I go to wind ensemble or symphony orchestra, I'm not just going to sit and play my part. I'm going to analyze what's going on around me as if I was the conductor. Again, not to say that your music ed classes or that methods classes or theory isn't helpful, but those are all just tools, and you have to take those tools and do the hard work yourself, which kind of sucks. And that sounds kind of like an answer from somebody who no longer works at the College of Music, who used to teach the symphonic band, but like, that's the answer. And I'm going to be, honest, and you have to do a lot of the work yourself and apply what you get and make it work for you and figure things out yourself.
What are we going to do when we get to an age when nobody remembers who Dennis Fisher was? I second everything Allie said. And as for what's helping me most right now, I want to point to specifically my teching experience. I did my 3 years in Green Brigade and then went out and got a tech job for senior year. Because we're in marching band right now, like out here in Lubbock, we're basically in person. So I'm living marching band every day. And I benefited from the experience of like, because I wasn't in GB, going to being able to tech at their rehearsals every day after school, and lots of like actual saying things in the heat of the moment, and trying out different phrases of, posture related things and step size related things. So finding those opportunities, like Allie said, for what you want to do. If Start Up the Band ever comes back post-COVID, that's a great resource for working with beginners, finding a private lesson gig. I recommend finding those opportunities outside of class to apply, like Allie said, the tools that you develop in class.
So I actually came from, if you don't know about like just my high school background, I came from a performing arts high school. When we did band for an hour and a half every other day. And it was like high level literature, like I think we played like 3 concerts every semester. And so like coming into North Texas, they were saying like, hey, like you want to be music ed major, you got to do GB for 3 years. And that was kind of like a culture shock for me. And so I was like, man, like, I don't know if I want to be a music educator, if I want to do marching band, if I have to teach marching band, because I've never done marching band. So why would I want to teach it? And why are you forcing me to do it for 3 years, And so when I specifically, this is just about GB, did that for 3 years, I was just like, man, like, I don't want to do this. Like, I definitely don't want to teach high school. So like, why am I doing this? And instead of using kind of like what Allie was saying, like a music educator's kind of brain, like why is Dr. Williams yelling at us for not getting the set right? Like why, what about the trumpet sounds is bad right now? Like things of that nature. So it's really, again, like taking the experiences that you already have had, creating those experiences in the future and then thinking about it from a music educator perspective. It's going to be the thing that helps you get into, obviously, the mindset of a music educator, because if you already have that mindset, once you're faced with a problem, you already know how to get to that problem, or you know how to fix that problem, rather than it kind of blowing up in your face and then being like, be better, So for me, personally, also, again, when we took, I'm sure Dr. Gerard teaches the music ed, like 4209, 4109 classes. I took that with Dennis Fisher, the Dennis Fisher. And that was kind of like, I kind of blew it off a little bit, low key, when we were taking the class, because I was like, man, I'm not going to have to do this. Like, I'm going to be an assistant director, like at a school. So everything's going to be figured out for me by the time I get a job. And it wasn't. So at my school, like there was no inventory whatsoever. So I'm like 80% done with that, pat on my own back. There wasn't a budget that I could like touch and like see, like there was like nothing, like, so I'm not necessarily building this program from the bottom up, but it definitely had some walls knocked down and I have to build those walls back up. So like that one experience really helped me, like being in those higher level music ed classes. And even like Melinda and Allie can like say, like, when we were in Dr. Gerard's class, like I was on fire every single class because we had to like critique everybody. You just kind of, because you had like 7 minutes of a teaching episode and you just kind of have to just do it for 7 minutes. And again, like Allie and Melinda could tell you, I was on fire every single person. Like you could have done this a little bit differently. And that's why it would have worked rather than what you did. So when I was seeing other people teach, I would think like, okay, well, what would I do? What would, what I would do may necessarily not be right, but it at least get you thinking, and that's the part that we don't do enough of before we get to student teaching.
Allie and I talked about a lot during our student teaching that, or we talked about how in our undergrad, we just don't have nearly enough time time teaching that we should. It seems like if you want to teach, you have to either be like a field tech for GB, and that's auditioned, right? Not everybody gets that. And then you have like 2 or 3 7-minute episodes in, 4109. And that's pretty much it until you get to student teaching, which is really a damn shame. Like, there should be more, because the best way, I think the only way we actually learn about teaching is by teaching and by seeing quality educators teach. And by seeing quality educators teach exactly what we want to teach. Like, you can learn a lot from hearing a professor teach a class, but if you want to be a middle school band director and you only see a really good director teach middle school band like once or twice, I mean, it's better to watch the middle school band director teach. So I think it is really important in undergrad, if you're really serious about coming into your student teaching experience a little bit more prepared, is to go out and find observation opportunities in a classroom with a quality educator. If you want to be in elementary, like, all the elementary schools in Dallas ISD are awesome. Just find someone you can observe. Like, you could do Start Up the Band, or find other opportunities maybe in the early childhood center, or field teching somewhere. But I will say the most beneficial part for me in music ed undergrad that is actually helping me now is student teaching, and like 4103, which is the class that choral ed majors take and elementary ed majors take, because that is a class that is on site and it's in the field. You get to observe and teach a little bit. And so yeah, I guess just in hindsight, all our music ed classes were really helpful, but they really just dipped our toes a little bit, and it's our responsibility to make up the difference. So I feel like all of us, we kind of applied in a weird time. So personally, I started applying seriously like the beginning of April, and it seemed like I applied to like 12 different districts in like a week. And it was getting pretty discouraging because I wasn't hearing from anything. I did, lots of bigger districts will have you do like a pre-interview, and it'll just be some sort, like a pre-recorded interview, I should say. And like, you don't ever hear back from those things. Like, it's like, did anyone even see it? So for a good amount of April, it felt like I was applying to all these jobs and we weren't hearing back, and we didn't know if like administrators were busy because of COVID and like, we were just gonna have to wait, or if they had more time on their hands because of COVID. Like, we just didn't know. So at the very end of April, I finally had a phone interview, a pre-screening for a larger district. And then I didn't hear back. It was a pre-screening with like someone from the district, and then the principal was supposed to call me later for a real interview. And the principal never called me, and I got a phone call from the principal of the school I'm at now at the end of April. And I had my interview the next day, and then I got the job offer at the end of the week, which was very lucky that it was my first interview. But I will say I heard back from all those almost, not all, that's exaggerating. I heard back from a lot of districts that I applied to in April, like in June and July, which was I got a call from like the very first district I applied to. I got an email for an interview like the week before school started. So I have no advice to the timeline. It sounds like it's everywhere. So I would just say put out as many applications as you can in a huge radius. I think it's a numbers game, truly.
Yeah, so my experience with the job hunting, it kind of went in waves. So I started, like, it was like the second day of student teaching, like I applied for a job, like just to apply for a job. Just because that process of sitting down and like filling out the district like employee application, and that can look different for a lot of different ISDs. But like, and there's I think it's like Frontline, where if you like enter your application, it'll transfer to other school districts that have that same kind of format. But still, like, the idea of just like sitting down and filling out the application, like, it's so tiresome. Like, you really don't think it is, but it is. It can take you like from like 40 minutes to an hour to complete one application. And especially because on those applications, they can ask you like different questions that you have to just like open-ended questions, like, what would you do in this situation? Like, if the principal is yelling at you in the hallway in between classes, like, how would you handle that situation? Like, what would you do? And it's like stuff that, one, you never like think about, or two, have ever experienced, because again, this is your first like time like applying for a big boy job, big girl job. And so that was kind of, you kind of have to be creative a little bit when you're applying for these kind of jobs. So I wanted to get used to that feeling of like sitting down and applying for jobs super early. So I started applying in like January. And again, so it went in waves. I went through kind of like a situation with depression, because student teaching can be depressing at times, just being just straightforward about that. And so I think there was like a month where like I just didn't apply for jobs because I was like, this is hopeless. Like, everybody's already getting interviews. Like, it's after NTMEA. Like, people already have jobs at this point. And you're just like, man, like, I don't see that for me in the future. You know, like I can't see myself getting a job like this early. But I still kind of did it anyway. And then, so again, like, I think I applied to, I think, 20 different schools. And the process, and there was, I think, at one point where like I would wake up and like immediately go to NTMEA. I immediately went to the NTMEA job board, and just like saw like what district had an opening, and just kind of just applied for it on a whim, like not necessarily like thinking anything would come of it. But again, like, that was just something that I just did, again, to like get myself in the habit of applying for those jobs, and like kind of like pacing myself like through the application, and, you know, thinking about that. So I actually only ever had 4 interviews out of the 20 applications that I, you know, applied for. 2 of those interviews were in Laredo. I had no like plan to go to Laredo, but like, if I got a job there, then like, why not? You know, because the job is a job, and especially like this is during COVID. So like, I need to secure a job, like, otherwise I'm just gonna be stuck and like just sitting on my butt, you know, for a year or semester, however long. So I applied for 2 jobs in Laredo, and I didn't get I didn't get those jobs. Even like, I don't know how, but the head director at one of the high schools like called me and was like, hey, you should apply. And I was like, okay, sure, I'll apply. Applied, did the interview, didn't get the job. Which is crazy, because it's like the high school, like the director of bands, like called my phone. Like, because I thought it was going to be like a rejection, like phone call, like, hey, you didn't get it, but thanks for applying. But it was like, no, like, you need to apply for the school. Didn't get the job. That's okay, whatever. 2 months later, I got, I saw the posting from the school that I'm at now, at Pershing Middle School. And Pershing Middle School is the biggest fine arts magnet school in HISD. So therefore, I have the biggest program in all of HISD, which is kind of crazy. But I saw the job posting and was like, nah, I'm not going to get that. But I'm just going to apply anyway, because why not? Like, I just need the experience. I need to, and myself, like, I have anxiety. Like, it's very developed. I'll say that. And it can definitely show when I'm doing interviews. For whatever reason, I had a good interview there. And so I had an interview with, it was like 13 people on a panel, which was crazy. Like, the biggest panel I talked to. I talked to And then, so I had the panel. Then I had the second round interview, which was the same day, which I thought was weird. Just like, okay, whatever. And then the fine arts director called me like an hour later, and I was like, oh, okay, this is kind of crazy. Like, I might actually get this job. And then the principal called me like at 9 p.m. that night and was like, hey, we want to give you the job. And I was like, oh, okay, that's sure, let's go with it. And I kind of felt bad because Brandon Rios, who's working in Galena Park, we had interviewed for the same job, and I was actually going to take his job. Don't tell him. It's okay. I can tell him. He's my roommate. But they offered me this job before I could take that one. And so that was kind of a shock for me. But so my job process, it took from January to June. So that's a 6-month process. And for a lot of people, they don't get jobs until like the week before school or a month into school, they don't get a job. So there is, I guess, no way to tell about the timeline. But definitely like reach out to whatever school you apply to, reach out to the head director and reach out to the principal, because that's what I did. I reached out to the principal and I got the job. So maybe that's something that you can do, because they are the ones that hired you. It's not the director. It's the principal. So
I want to see how concisely I can put all my thoughts together, because listening to Valeria and Tyler talk brought back strong memories of the process. The most important thing that I want to emphasize is what Tyler said about checking the TMEA job board. That's a really great place to find out about positions. From that, always, I think this is what Valeria just said, is emailing the person. If you found it on TMEA, whoever is listed for the posting, if it's the fine arts director or the head director. I think that's how I wound up in my current position, because I emailed the head director, and she got back to me and was like, hey, can I interview you tomorrow? And that was a casual first round with the head director, and then later a formal second round with head director and admin. The other thing that I want to add is exploring your network. The first big interview that I got in April was a position where I knew somebody who had just graduated from UNT working in the district, and it was a medium-sized, smallish district. So he was at one of 2 middle schools. So I was like, hey, what can you tell me about this job? And he was like, oh, just send your stuff. And I feel like he got me into that. So I would, you'll have a network from your cooperating teachers, maybe if there's something in your district, or if they know people, or from UNT alumni. Not that necessarily most of us are going to be in a position to wield that kind of influence, but you never know. So make use of your network also. The final thing I want to say is reassurance on the timeline, because you will see people getting jobs in May or right around graduation. And one of my best friends is Taylor Gaskins, who is a super duper overachiever. And I just felt all this pressure of I can't, I don't have a job, but Taylor had a job at this point. But then it'll work out. First year teachers can get hired in April, but they can get hired in June and July, and it will be okay.
So my timeline is generally pretty similar to everyone else's. I started applying for jobs 2 weeks after spring break and was on that application grind literally the whole time until I got my job in July. I did almost 40 applications and I got 3 job interviews. Doing applications and interviews, it is all a game. It is a political game. You might go into an interview or do those one-way interviews where you talk to a recording and you have 30 seconds to read a question and then a minute to answer to nobody. And you might not agree with that question. You're like, that's a really dumb question. And obviously I would teach it this way, but this is the right answer. You need to give the right answer. And you need to do that in interviews as well, because it's a game. You can go into an interview or do an application and be like, I think I answered those questions really well. That's really good pedagogy and it's really good for the kids. But if it's not the answer that they're looking for, they won't go on with you. The job that I have now, when I took that interview, my head director told me later that I they made fun of me, but also they were impressed because I answered all the questions correctly. I like checked the AP boxes. You know, I answered those AP questions that you don't do in band or you don't do in choir or, you know, in elementary music. We don't write stuff on the board and do objectives. We don't do a lot of, like, they're just things that we just don't do, but you have to play the game and answer the question correctly in order to just get your foot in the door. And then once you're somewhere, you can kind of explore and be like, okay, well, that's what I said in my interview, but can we maybe try this or some variation of that? You just have to know how to play the game. And that's a sucky answer, but that's how the world works. It's so political, literally everywhere. And you have to just be able to play that game well. My other advice would be, and this is what everyone says all the time, but like apply everywhere. Don't just apply in DFW. I know, especially for when we were applying for jobs, like NTMEA Job Board, Teacher Job Network, different district websites still had job postings, but jobs weren't really available. Districts are required to post a job, even if they already know who they're going to hire, and they are required to have it up for a certain amount of time. So if you see a job go up and you're like, whoa, that's like my dream district, and you apply, they may already know who they're going to hire. They just have to have that up for a technicality. So especially during COVID, there were lots of jobs posted on NTMEA and all these other websites, but people weren't leaving their jobs. This was the worst time to leave a job. People needed the security. So people were just moving around districts. They were, you know, at the high school and would just go to the other high school in their district, or at the middle school and go to the high school. Like, it was just this circle of jobs not really being available. So that's why it's, you know, especially this year, it's so important that you apply everywhere, not just DFW. It's very hard to get a job in DFW. DFW is big, but it's not that big. I only applied to jobs in DFW for personal reasons. Had I not had those reasons that I needed to be here, I would have applied everywhere. And I was stressed the whole time looking for jobs because I was like, I'm not going to get a job. I'm only applying here and not in Lubbock and not in Laredo. And I wish I could, but I can't. I got super lucky. And I don't know how I got so lucky. You need to apply everywhere. I will also say one last thing, that it is okay to get, if you get an offer, to ask for time to think about it. You don't have to just like take the job on the spot. The job that I currently have, I interviewed for it. The next day, literally 6 minutes before I had a different interview, they called and offered me the job. And I told that AP, I said, can I have some time to think about it? Because I was about to do a different job interview and I wanted to take that interview and see what my other options were. Because even though I'm pressed to find a job, I still want to be somewhere where I know I'm going to be successful and I'm going to learn and I'm going to have the most impact. I'm not just going to blindly take a job because I need one. I probably would have in the end taken a job because I needed one, but it's good to like have those options there and say like, can I have a little bit of time? I'll call you back tomorrow, and just play it out. Take the other interview if you're, excited about that job and have that coming up. You don't have to just jump on the first thing that comes to you. It's smart to maybe do that, but you don't have to be so fast about it, like leave them wanting more. Distance makes the heart grow fonder, things like that.
My year, I'm currently in the 4th or 5th week. So my district is, it's in person, but students or families can opt to do virtual. So I'm currently doing a blended version and a socially distanced version of general music. So it's been going, I think, as well as it can, which is being a little bit optimistic. But it's been a real struggle trying to figure out how I'm going to teach these kids music when we can't sing. And I really love the Kodai method, and that involves lots of passing games, like you pass objects around, and we can't have any shared objects, right? So we can't do any of those games. Kodai also has lots of singing games and like chasing games, very active games, usually sitting around in a circle. And we can't do that because we have to be 6 feet apart. So there was a steep learning curve when I was lesson planning before school started. But now that I'm in the swing of things, I think it's been going like as well as it can be. I've been having fun with my kids, getting to know them, like settling into a new like working environment is also always kind of difficult and like nervous every day kind of thing, but it's been good. I mean, student teaching prepared us for this somewhat, and it's been going good. Tiring, super tiring, but it's been good.
Yeah, so at my school, again, I'm the director of bands at my middle school, and I have about 160 kids, all to myself. And so that just in itself, like without virtual learning, that just would be like tough anyway, right? Because I have, again, I only teach 5 classes, and we're on eight period block. Every other day, or no, I teach 6 classes. So I have 3 classes today, and I have 3 classes tomorrow. And so for me personally, it's a little bit of a struggle. One, because I don't know these kids. I don't know their learning styles. I don't know what they know. I don't know what they do know. I don't know what they don't know. So I kind of had to just do I don't know, I just kind of like came into, I just kind of jumped into it, you know? So what I did at the beginning was I made a pre-assessment just to kind of see what they know. So it's like, do they know the rhythms? Do they know what a time signature is? Do they know key signatures? Do they know, what rests are? Because again, like these are middle schoolers. And so obviously the beginners don't know anything. That's fine. 7th and 8th graders, like the 7th graders, at least, they have been a 6th grader for only half a year, essentially, or a year and like in a quarter or whatever. And, so now they're coming into 7th grade, like still not knowing their notes, still not knowing, what an embouchure is, not knowing what a key signature is, because they lost that opportunity. And then I have 8th graders who have, they've been doing band for a solid year. And they know a couple things and they're pretty okay. But again, they just haven't been engaged with music as much as they should have or could have for the last 6 months, for the last, 5 months. So my battle right now is like taking what I think is important, putting that in a virtual setting and hoping that they take it and understand that it is important. Because when we come back to playing, like the things that we're talking about now, we're still going to talk about them, but now we're going to actually apply it to our instruments. Or, and my school district, my entire school district is virtual for the first 6 weeks. This is the 3rd week of virtual learning. And so we go back October 19th. This week, the students are also choosing if they want to opt in for face-to-face or virtual. And they only get that choice up until next semester. So we don't know what the numbers are going to look like. So I don't know. I may have like 100 kids do virtual learning and then only 60 kids come to in-person class. But I don't know what 60 kids are going to come to in-person class. One class may have 3 kids. Another class may have 30 kids, So I don't know what that looks like. Hopefully they're going to tell us so that I can start planning, because like just planning now, like to be honest with you, I don't know what I'm going to teach tomorrow. I really don't. Like I'm going to wake up tomorrow and be like, you know what, we're going to talk about inharmonics. And like, that's what it's going to be, because again, like you just simply don't know. And there's a lot of things that that you can do. But again, like I'm not going to play, or I'm not going to like force my kids to like play their instruments right now because of just the latency, and like some kids like don't even have instruments because the last director didn't get them clean before or after COVID happened. And there's just a lot of external factors which I have no control over. And so I kind of have to go with what I think is best. Because again, like it's my program and it's like my like way of like doing this. So like right now, like it's kind of boring, I'm gonna say, because we're just doing theory. So like some of my kids, like they don't know like what a key signature is past one sharp, you know? And it's like, man, like, you know, you do music for so long, and we're college students, we do music for so long. It's like, man, like that's so easy, like one sharp G major, you know, but like a sixth grader doesn't know that. A seventh grader now especially doesn't know that. And so my eighth graders, like they just don't know that. And so I kind of have to, again, like not building it from the ground up, but building those walls that were broken and just kind of really filling in those gaps. So that's why I'm taking this first 6 weeks to fill in those gaps and to really build personal individual musicianship. So again, by the time we come to face, we could just pick that up and just put it to our instruments instead of having to learn it as we go.
I am really enjoying my first year so far. I feel like I'm in a good position. I love the people that I work with. It's West Texas, so it's weird, but there are 5 directors at the high school, and one of the other assistants is also a first-year teacher. So she and I have been like kind of going through this together, and there are also 2 other assistants and a head director to guide us. So that's been a really cool experience. We are presently basically in person, like Valeria's district. Lubbock-Cooper gave students the option to be at home or in person. And basically everybody but like 20 kids in band has opted to be in person. So we're going ahead with marching band. Our UIL contest is still happening. It's a combination of less population density out in West Texas and also a little less fear of COVID out in West Texas. But I will say that in band, we are probably like one of the most careful groups in the school because we have to be, but we're taking lots of precautions when we play inside. And one of the benefits of being in marching band is that we can do a lot of stuff outside and socially distanced. Something that I'm particularly enjoying this year is it's a little less competitive environment than I had experienced so far. Both my student teaching and teching experiences out in DFW were at huge high schools that were had very strict procedures in place. And I worried a lot when I was teaching, like, is that the right thing to say? And I would usually err on the side of like, I'm just not gonna say anything because I'm afraid of being wrong. And out here now, and maybe part of it's also a common, like being an actual teacher, someone on staff who is trusted to work with the kids. But I worry a lot less about what I say. And because they're less established, I feel like there's nothing I can say that won't help somebody in some way. And I feel totally comfortable just being able to like trial and error. And I never feel like, I always feel supported by the people around me in my trial and error. So I feel fortunate in that, and I hope it continues for the rest of this year.
So my first year experience, I have kind of mixed feelings about, just because this is a mixed world and that's, you know, what we're doing right now. Right now we are 100% virtual, and we go in person, face-to-face, not next Monday. On Monday is when we see kids for the first time in real life. It will also be the same thing as Melinda and Valeria, where they have the option to come if they want. We sent out a survey. We have been doing marching band as well in person, and we do that outside. Kids have not been allowed in the building actually. So like today we were supposed to have rehearsal and it rained, so we have to just cancel because we can't go inside. So for me, marching band has been great. That's been like the fun part of this for me. Not because I'm like gung-ho marching band. I did not do drum corps. I don't care about drum corps. It's been fun for me because this is the time where I've been allowed to see students. You know, this is that like little bit, that sense of normalcy of seeing kids in person. And I run the visual block. I teach them how to march. I do that all myself. And so it's the time where I can like build those student relationships, meet some of those kids, kind of like get to know them. Which again, it's that sense of normalcy that I don't get anywhere else at this point. Our program we're the biggest high school in Arlington, and marching band is optional. So even that sense of normalcy, we only have maybe 40 kids, including guard and drums, that come to band every day. So it's a small sense of normalcy, but that's like what I am clinging to like maintain my sanity. It's been very difficult for me, however, everything online, because kind of like Tyler said, there is only so much that I can control we have had a lot of back and forth with our admin about how we do virtual learning, because band is not a math class, it is not an English class, it is not the same, and we cannot do things the same, but we are being asked to do things that don't feel well for us to give the best opportunities for our students. So it's been hard to just kind of like swallow that and be like, wow, this is not going to work out well, and this is not giving them the best opportunity or helping them learn in any way, but this is what we have to do because this is what we're being asked from our administration. Or even I'm just the assistant. I'm a brand new first year teacher. My head director has been teaching for a very long time, and if he wants to do something some way and I don't agree with it and I don't think that's how students are going to learn and it's not working, sucks, man. That's what we're doing. And so that's been not hard to adjust to, because obviously coming from college, like I don't run anything. I'm not in charge of literally anything. So this is not new to not be in charge of something, but it's hard when you come in and you're like, I'm going to like make a difference. I'm going to try and like make music fun. It's not like, it's just band. Like chill out. Like people are here to like have a good time and to like escape things because it's music and we all love music for whatever reason. And to not have any, not that I don't have a say or don't have an influence. My head director is very kind to like give me a lot of opportunity to have an input, but it's his word in the end and it's admin's word in the end. And that's very hard during this time to try and teach and have your own sense of autonomy when you don't. So that's been hard. But like I said, marching band is the only sense of normalcy that we've had so far. Not because marching band is like, you know, again, I didn't do drum corps and I don't care, but like, you know, that's all we have right now.
So Allie kind of touched on this a little bit, but I just wanted to hear a little bit about like how much your administration is involved, particularly like during this time. Like how involved are they in your guys' teaching, and you know, what kind of input do they have over what you guys are doing, you know, in either in the in-person classroom or online?
I'm going to speak to that just a little bit. So for my district, you know, fine arts can tell us this is how you should run your Zoom classes for band because you're special, you are not a math class. But in Arlington, each individual campus principal has final say. So even if our fine art admin is like, do this, this is going to work. If our principal doesn't want to do that, then we're not doing that. And in a normal setting, your APs, whoever is assigned to you, would do walkthroughs and they would do T-test evaluations. So for us, they are still doing that. It is just virtual. They're doing virtual walkthroughs. They're just coming into our Zooms and seeing if we are following the campus guidelines on how they want class to be run. For us, they want the entire campus to be uniform. They want everyone to do full 50-minute classes. They want it to be 20 minutes of small group and 40 minutes full group or whatever. And so they come in and they check the AP in charge of us to make sure that we are abiding by those, again, campus, not district guidelines or just, you know, preferences. And if we don't do those, then we get called out for it and we have to change, which we have had experiences with recently. We were doing Canvas a little bit differently than everyone else, and we had to change that because that was not in line with what the rest of the campus was doing. Every administration is different though. I work at a Title I school, and so generally administration is really good with students because they have their own set of issues, especially it's such a large district, it's such a large high school. But with everybody kind of just like guessing on what the right thing to do is right now and how to make everything as best they can, our admin is just trying to make the best of it. And for them, that means checking in on everyone to make sure we're all doing the same thing, which, take that if you will, is good or bad, whatever it is. I think it's contextual depending on where you're at.
Y'all feel good about that? Anyone else want to touch on that?
Yeah, I'll just say that like you have to like remember that like admin is also scrambling, because they have like there's like so many different levels above yourself as a teacher. So like there's you as a teacher, then there's your principal who's your boss, and then there's their boss who's like a boss of like 10 different principals in that area, and then there's their boss who's like the superintendent, area superintendent, and then there's their boss who's like the actual superintendent. So like there's a lot of information coming from the top, and it's just trickling down ever so slowly, and then it gets back to you. So you just kind of have to like just kind of trust that they have the best interest at heart. So like my school district has like over, I think, like 4,000 teachers, just because it's the largest school district in all of Texas. And then like the 7th largest school district in the US. So they have to make a lot of decisions that affect everybody, and not just me personally as a teacher. So our program is using Microsoft Teams. It's not using Zoom. And Microsoft Teams has a little bit more functionality, I think. So that's a good use, or that's a good tool that I use. And then we also have, I'm not sure if any other districts have this, but we have like our own like educational kind of platform, kind of like a Blackboard, but for my school district, and it's called It's Learning. And so that's where I have to put in the homework, and then that's where I have to like accept homework and grade and do things like that nature. And so they really wanted us to like use that, even though like, you know, I may want to use Google Classroom for recordings, so they can like put their recordings in Google Classroom and just kind of grade it from there. So that's kind of tricky for me right now. But as far as like admin, they're just scrambling as well. So whatever they don't know, I obviously don't know. And so it's a kind of like just wait and then we'll see.
Yeah, so kind of going back to student teaching and asking lots of questions, what are some questions or maybe some topics of questions that you wish you had asked in student teaching?
I'll go first if I can. So what I would ask is, if I were you, I would think about the very first day of class, and I would ask so many questions about how your mentor teacher does the first day of class with all their grades, because first day of school is very, very important. If you're at elementary school or if you're in the middle school or high school, you have to, it's something that in student teaching you maybe don't think about, because typically you're in the fall semester and you don't ever see the beginning. But starting off like beginners in band and starting off kindergarten is really difficult. And yeah, I wish I would have asked a lot more questions about like what my mentor teacher does the first week of school or the first day.
I'm going to say that even if you don't really have questions, because more often than not, when you student teach the first week or up to several weeks, you're just observing and you're just, so take notes. I like walked around with a little notepad all the time. I looked super annoying. And I wrote down like literally everything that director did in rehearsal. I would write down what he did for warm up, what he said to them, what happened from that. And I would write that down. And I was lucky enough to where I got to debrief with a director who I was observing after each class. You don't get that a lot of the time. A lot of time it's like once a week, if that. So after every class, he would be like, well, do you have any questions? More often than not, your co-ops, they want you to ask questions. The other student teacher who was with me, the head director, like pulled him aside one day and was like, dude, at the middle school, they said you don't really ask a lot of questions and you're quiet. You need to ask more questions because they're talking about that, which is super weird. You're like, why are they gossiping about him? Oh my God, he's just shy. But like they were, you know, concerned like, oh, he's not asking questions. Like maybe he doesn't care. So with that, I would take notes about like literally everything that happened in a rehearsal or even just a warm up. And even if I already knew the answer, or if I already knew like, oh, I would do this and this is why, and I know that it works, I would still ask that question because it's good to hear a different opinion. It's good to hear a different perspective. And again, I said it's all political and it's all game. And that helps you to play that game of like I just said, the other student teacher wasn't asking a lot of questions because he was like, oh, I understand why you did this. I understand why you did that, but it's a game. And this co-op was like, oh, he's not asking questions. He's probably not interested. Ask the questions that you know the answers to, because you also might not know the answer. And as simple to like procedure, all the basic things that you don't think about anymore as an experienced college musician, you don't remember how you teach opening the cases in middle school. So like, why did you teach it in this way? Why did you say this instead of this? How would you react to if a student, just like so many hypotheticals, you can just come up with questions on the spot that may sound dumb. Most of the time your co-op's not going to think it's dumb. Even like the little baby questions of like, why do you have them walk in and sit down this way rather than this way? You know, why do you have them come in and sit down without talking? Or why do you have them warm up on their own and not as a group? Just like the littlest things. Even if you already know the answer, ask the question anyways.
I want to add one other kind of question, and this isn't really asking questions to get knowledge in the way that Allie and Valeria were describing, but something that I found as a way of like getting involved and showing that you're interested is rather than asking like, and this is very specific, but like, do you have anything for me to do? I tried to approach it as like, what can I do for you? And especially with my high school director, she'd be like, oh, copy this. I just found like asking the what can, like assuming that there is something to be done was a good way to get something to do.
Well, amazing. Sorry. But I love her. I love Amy Woody. For me, I kind of went into student teaching kind of having a lot of knowledge, just a lot of pedagogical knowledge, and just a lot, and I have already been like thinking about a lot of things. And so when I went into student teaching, I didn't necessarily know everything, but it was kind of like Allie said, like, you already know answers to some things, and so you don't want to ask those questions because you already know those answers. And so I got a little bit too comfortable with that because it was kind of the same thing. If I'm like in a new space, especially if I don't know anybody, I'm just going to kind of sit back and just observe. One, because I don't want to say or do the wrong thing. But two, I just kind of wanted to, just see like what the vibe is like and what the structure is like because it was different at the middle school and the high school. And then kind of seeing how can I apply myself to this environment, because I'm only here temporarily, I'm not here for the long haul. So I kind of have to see like, what is my role in the situation? And so I kind of just sat back and just kind of listened, and I was very quiet. And the directors didn't like that. Just straight up, like they just kind of just like, you don't seem you want to be here. You don't seem very interested. You don't seem like you want to be a team player. And so I was just kind of like, man, like I don't want to, come out the gates guns a blazing. Like I don't want to just kick you off the podium and teach the top band, because I'm not gonna thrive that way. And something else I think we should think about is like, what are you gonna get out of student teaching and what are you gonna put into it? So for me, and I kind of went into it the wrong way. I think, just in hindsight, I kind of thought at least like 3 weeks or 4 weeks in, like I'm learning things that I don't want to do as a teacher, not things that I do want to do as a teacher, and so like having that kind of mindset, maybe it's 60% things you don't want to do as a teacher and 40% things you do want to do as a teacher, or maybe it's 100% things you do want to do as a teacher. Just defining what that mindset is, and because again, like maybe you have a good relationship with your co-ops and you love every single thing they do. That's fine. But then maybe there's the opposite of that, where you don't have a good relationship with your co-ops and you don't want to do anything that they do as a director or as an educator. So you're gonna have to kind of find that balance, because every teacher has their own way of doing things, and you may not like it, but obviously it gets results. So they're doing something right. Maybe it's not the way that you want to do that one thing. So that maybe could be a question that you ask, I don't like this, but let me hear your reasoning on it. Maybe don't say that, but kind of frame it in that way. Like, I don't like this, so let me see like, why did they do this? And maybe it'll click for me.
Okay. Well, thank you for your wonderful answers to those questions. If anybody else has a question that they want answered, or they just want to ask, or they're curious about, feel free to email the North Texas Music Educators at gmail.com, and we'll see what we can do to try and help you out with those. One final applause for our panel.